Okay, in this second video we're going to attempt to install and set up the openlrsng configurator so that we can change the settings on the transmitter module and the receiver. So because we're using the chiplrs transmitter module and receiver, there's a couple of steps that we need to pick up specifically. First one is I'm using a Windows tablet for the demonstration, but because the configurator itself is actually an app for the Chrome web browser, first thing you need to do is install the Chrome web browser. It's available for Mac OS, Windows, and Linux. Then we get to go to the openlrsng wiki, which is at openlrsng.org. On the wiki manual link, we have a connecting hardware to a computer, and then under connecting hardware to a computer, we have to install the drivers. The chiplrs use the CP2102, so there's a link to that web page, and then you can download. There's basically 3 or 4 different versions of Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Pick whichever one is appropriate for your specific OS, download the software, install the software. Next step is to go and get the configurator itself. The configurator is at the Chrome web store. Basically just do a search on openlrsng and it's the only thing that'll show up. I'm not able to install it because I've already installed it, but that's not a problem. I've actually set mine up with a desktop icon so that I don't have to open up anything else. I can just open it directly. Now what you see here is the initial startup screen for the configurator. I will need to connect to the transmitter to the USB port. Do that with a handy dandy little USB cable. Of course, the USB cable will be dependent upon what kind of port you have, and it uses a mini USB cable on the chiplrs. You can see it right here. Let's see if we can get it. There's the light. So that's the USB port on the chiplrs transmitter. And then the USB doesn't provide enough power, so you'll have to turn on the transmitter, leave the module in the transmitter. Now, we go back to the tablet screen. You can see it's actually automatically chosen the COM port for this specific device, and then we hit the connect. Connect button has turned green, and our display has switched over to the actual configuration settings for the transmitter module. Now on the chiplrs transmitter module there is a toggle switch, and what that toggle switch does is move you between number 1, number 2, and number 3 of your profile. So basically what this allows you to do is, in the case of some people, they like to use that toggle switch as a range check, and what you would do is the first profile would be set up with a power setting of 1, and the second profile would be set up with a power setting of 7, and that would give you fundamentally the equivalent of a range check, low power mode. I don't use it for that. In fact, up until now I've never used the toggle switch, but that's basically what the toggle switch allows you to do. Now for the guys in Britain, the most important thing on this screen here is going to be your operating frequency, which is this third thing here, the number of hop channels, and the maximum desired frequency. as this ships from the factory, the openlrsng, the chiplrs transmitter module and receiver are set for 433 megahertz band. That needs to be changed to 458 for the UK. All you need to do is literally anything that's listed as a 433000 gets changed to a 458000. You've got 6, in my case I've chosen 6 hopping frequencies, so I've got 6 little frequencies down here that you would need, if that's what you've decided to do. You can do anywhere from 1 to 24 hopping frequencies, and that would just change the number of these fields down here that you get to edit for your multiple different frequencies that you're hopping against. The settings here are for your telemetry and the number of channels that you actually end up using on the transmitter module. That can be anywhere from 4 to 16 channels. I've got it activated with FrSky, what we call a D series or hub style telemetry, and the proper settings for that. And then the only other thing to point out is you've got this bind code here. If the checkbox next to the bind code is selected, every time you save your changes to the EEPROM, it's going to change your bind code, which basically means every time you change your settings, you're going to have to rebind your transmitter to your receiver. I've got that unchecked so that I don't have to go through that every time. So that basically covers your transmitter module, and the next question is how do we get to change the settings on the receiver? Well, it's actually quite simple. You click on this receiver module tab, and then you connect power to your receiver that has already been bound. Now the receiver gives you just a single red light, and then the display has basically switched, and now it's giving you all of the settings that you can change on your receiver, which are basically a bunch of different things on how to decode the PPM stream, which you don't even have to touch. The middle panel here is for failsafe settings, and then the far right panel is basically a mapping of the ports to their functions. Now, the way this is set up, you basically have 8, or actually from the factory it's 10 channels for servos to connect to the receiver, and then I've changed that so that I'm only getting 8 servos coming out, and then I've got 2 analog inputs for telemetry and 2 digital, basically a serial port on here for the more advanced telemetry. And that basically is what I've done with mine. The only other change I've made is on the failsafe delay. You can change that. I've got it set so that basically the system has to have an entire second of missing connectivity before the failsafe will trip and move the servos to their failsafe settings. This is kind of a good benefit for submarines, and a lot of the standalone failsafe devices that you can buy for the submarines will have anywhere from a 1 second to a 5 second delay, just so that you're not triggering the failsafe when your connectivity is not at the optimum. Let's face it, a foot below the surface you could have missing packets, but you just don't want to have a continuous missing packets. So that's basically the difference between a true failsafe and basically a false failsafe. That's it. That's about as much as you have to do on the configuration. Like I said, for the UK guys, the only real settings that you need to change are moving from the 433 base frequency to the 458. So that wraps it up for the configurator. If you guys have any more questions about this stuff, don't hesitate, post them. I'll see if I can answer them.